Okay, I'm here. This is Dutch. This is Duke. Dutch is over there. Come here, Dutch. This is Duke, and this is Dutch. And this is their roadmap to success. Now, basically, the dogs here sit. Remember, when you're giving a command, the word should precede the action. So if you see the dog's about to, like, come. If you can precede the action with the command word. So it should be, if you see your dog about to sit, say the word sit, then the butt hits the ground, then you pet them. Now, if you want to use the marker word that I talked to you about, the way you would do that is, good is the word you guys selected. So what I would do is I'd have 10 treats. Probably have each one of you, maybe one of you doing this outside, one of you doing inside. So you just walk, just say, good, give the dog a treat. Take 2 steps, say good, give it another treat. It doesn't have to sit, it doesn't have to do anything. You just say the word, and then within 2 seconds, they get a treat. Then you take a couple steps away, repeat it for all 10 treats. Do that 3 total times. So each dog will have 10 treats per practice session, 3 practice sessions of 10 treats each time. After that, use the word good to mark behavior that you like. So the dog comes over here, sits down, you say good, and then you pet it. It lays down, you say good, and give it a treat. It comes to you, say good, and do it. Now this is a bridge word instead of using good boy. And if you're going to use the word, command word, and good at the same time, what I would do is, here, let's do it here. Good, come, and then I pet. So I say good right before they got there, then I would say the word come, that's the command word, and then I would pet them. Now I usually only use either good or the command word. I don't use them at the same time like I just did. You can, but typically I use them interchange. I would use the good word until I've taught the dog the command word, and then I drop good and just say sit, and then I pet the dog. So remember, the word precedes the action, and then after the action the dog gets a treat if they do it right away. If you want to hold off on feeding them, I'll show you how I would feed them. Okay. All right. So let me see. So we got a little bit off track on this session. So let me rearrange my thoughts. So I think the dogs here have gotten into fights a couple times. Now, one of them just got neutered a week ago. One's going to get neutered in a week. I think that's going to help quite a bit. It helps. It doesn't solve problems, but it turns down the volume quite a bit. Now, there's other contributing factors. And a big one in these dogs is exercise. They have a yard they can play around in, but sometimes it's muddy, so they don't get to run around as much as we'd like. Your average dog needs an hour's worth of exercise every single day. And exercise is best done in small spurts, sprinkled throughout the day, every 2 to 4 hours. Come? And so basically what we want to do is, we went over some creative ways of exercising. So one of the first ways to sit, there we go, that we can do is, there you go, buddy. You want a photo bomb? There you go. Yes. So basically what we want to do is come up with some creative forms of exercise. Now, these dogs like to fetch. Now, this dog right here, this is Dutch. Dutch doesn't fetch as well as Duke does. So what I would do is, when Dutch is in the mood to fetch, he brings you something. Maybe have somebody take Duke out to the other room and do a little training or something like that, and then play a little bit with Dutch with treats to reward him and reinforce him for wanting to do it. So the way I play fetch, as I throw the object, I say fetch. When the dog picks the object up, I say fetch, and then I hold the treat out, and then I pop, right before I pop in their mouth, I say the word fetch. That kind of connects the 3 elements of fetch: throwing, going and getting it, bringing it back, and getting a reward. And so when Dutch does that, stop what you're doing if you can in practice, because the fetch is a wonderful way to exercise them. And being puppies, we can't do some of the things like I'd like to do, like dog skiing or doggy stairmaster. So we also talked about getting a eye fetch. If it were me, I would get rid of these chairs, put them somewhere else in the house, and then we put a table or something up there, and I would block out the bottom part of the window, probably about really where your window jamb is there, all the way across with white paper. You have an overhang in the front of the house? So put it on the outside so they can't scratch it down. That way you can keep your blinds open. You don't have as much of a fishbowl for people who are driving by, and then you get sunlight to come in. We're taller, we can see outside, the dogs can't see outside. Otherwise, it promotes barking. If they get a seat outside the window, they bark and the thing appears to go away. They think that they caused that to go away. So getting back to exercise, I think that's a huge factor for both of these dogs. So some of the things we went over is playing fetch. Now, what I would do is I would fetch them. Inside is going to be different than outside, depending on the length. So every unique scenario, we want to figure out what the maximum number of fetches is. So I would basically, with an empty stomach, remember, always come. Exercise your dog with an empty stomach. Never exercise until 90 minutes after they've eaten. Otherwise, they can be fatal. Sit. And so what I would do is I'd play fetch if we're doing it in the house, right where we're at. throw it, say fetch, and keep doing it until that dog's like, are you crazy? I fetched 99 times. Now we know 99 is the maximum number of fetches in the house. We do it outside, maybe from that side of the yard to the back. Maybe that's 49 because it's longer distance. So once we know what that maximum number is, and I would just do that once or twice so you know what each dog's maximum number is, then we can figure out we need a certain amount of exercise to set the dog up for success for certain things. Now, throughout the session, I would stop at different times and say, and how would we achieve that? And the guardians went through kind of a couple different options, but exercise was not one of them. That should be one of the first things in your thought process in the forefront. And you should be proactive, not waiting for the dog to need the exercise. If they get the zoomies and run around here at 7 o'clock at night, well, guess what? At 6:15, we need to start getting them some exercise. After exercise, they need 10 minutes to recover before the next thing happens, and driving should not count in a recovery time. So basically, I'm going to fetch as many times as the dog will so I know what that maximum number is. And then let's say it's 100. Well, then I'm going to practice, maybe let's try 50 fetches and then do an activity. And how is the dog's behavior in that activity? So maybe we have relatives come where we do 50 fetches for one dog and 60 fetches for the other dog. And then we have some guests come over after 10 minutes of rest and we judge each dog. Okay, Dutch got that was a C. Duke, that was like a B+. Okay, so we're getting close to what Duke needs. Now we got to figure out what Dutch needs. And so the idea was to keep playing around with those elements until eventually you were like, wow, that was A+ behavior. Now we know how much exercise the dog needs to be successful in that activity. There's nothing wrong with exercising your dog before you go to the dog park. I wouldn't take these dogs to the dog park. Taking the dogs, going for a walk. Most people never think about exercising their dog before a walk, but that's a wonderful way to get to let off that top level of steam. Before you're going to eat yourself or before you're going to teach them something, get them the appropriate amount of exercise. And there's going to be different amounts of exercise for different activities. Sit. Yes, you're such a good sitter. Yes, you are. Oh, yes. And you lucked out because your breeder is a dog show person. I'm not a big fan of dog show people. Well, no, I shouldn't say that, but I've seen a lot of dogs in dog shows that don't really have the best quality of life. They're in a kennel for most of the day. These dogs are free. Now they've gotten in a couple fights over food, and I think part of that is having too much excess energy. And guarding resources is not an unusual thing when you have two dogs very similar age. If you're watching this, I would not recommend getting two puppies at the same time. I usually recommend getting a puppy when your adult dog is like 6 to 9, depending on the breed size. Then you get the puppy. The adult dog's already been trained. It'll help you train the puppy. And then once the puppy's trained, then the puppy helps keep the adult dog alive longer because they're more active. And the adult has to stay more active to keep up. And it really helps the quality of both dogs' lives and just seems to make things a lot easier. You can do it, but almost 100% of the time that I have clients who get two puppies at the same time, it's very challenging. So puppies can be a lot of work to begin with. So that's a nice way to keep them set up for success. All right, so for fetching is a great one. We also talked about scent games. I'd like you to Google scent games. There's a whole bunch of different variants of it, but teaching the dog to sniff around, but make sure those dogs are separated for this sort of thing. Speaking of it, before I forget, I would get an X pen. Get one that's about 40 inches tall. It's 8 sections. I would probably put, because you have nice painted, it looks really nice in here. Get some piece of cardboard, something like that. You put in between the wall and the fence so it doesn't, because otherwise it'll rub some of the paint off. And you can slide it going all the way across here. When the dogs, maybe one of them's over there, one of them's over here with a Omega Paw treat ball or a snuffle mat or bones or whatever it is. We'd like them to practice being together when chewing stuff, but on opposite sides. Now, be wary, because if you have two people in here with one dog and the other dog out there, that can be kind of looked at as a little bit of being ostracized. So I would flip them or have a human on each side, and I would flip it up so it's not always the same combination. So those X pens that you get, if you get one tall enough, it has an actual door. So you can unlatch it and you can walk through there and close the door behind you, and you can leave it up longer if you need to. I wouldn't leave it up all the time. I'd probably leave it up at specific times where the dogs are trying to do things together that they might fight about, so we can keep a barrier between them. I would much rather see a barrier than right now the guardians have a bunch of leashes tethered, and that can create a lot of frustration in many dogs. And also if I'm pulling on the leash and I'm staring at the other dog's staring back at me, that's the precipitators. I'm going to want to go over a little bit of dog body language, the things we want to look out for. Yes, you're going to sneak into the camera again. So the very first thing is usually the dog will freeze. So I'm kind of wiggly and jiggly as dogs normally are. And then I got a bone and the other dog comes nearby and I go like, that stillness is a big warning. A stare is a big warning. Licking the lips can be a warning, a sign of stress and anxiety. Sniffing the ground could be a sign of a little bit of anxiety. Let me see. Pupils dilated, breathing heavy, holding their breath, getting stiff, the tail going straight up, the ears moving forward, the hackles, the hair on their back standing up. Those are all warning signs. Every dog has a different combination in which ones they go for. But once you start seeing those signs and you say, ooh, the tails got stiff and they both start holding their breath, then we call them away. Then we can get them out of that fight to begin with. But again, I think in this house, if we can get into that routine of exercising them multiple times a day and setting them up for success so they don't ever get to the point where they have too much energy, it's going to explode. So we talked about using the scent games. We also talked about getting an Omega Paw treat ball for each dog. Now again, make sure that you're doing this separate so there's not any resource guarding issues. I would also get them both snuffle mats and feed them out of snuffle mats. If a dog's using its nose, it's very draining of energy. It's also calming and relaxing and comforting. So it achieves up. So one of the dogs got on the counter. So that's a good thing to talk about. So basically, yes, that was you. Are you the counter surfer? Yes, you were. So basically, yes, you're a bit of a photo bomber now. Any attention is validating. So what I did is I clapped a couple times. That got the dog to come down and come to me, and then it got some attention for getting up there. A lot of dogs get on the counter, and then we make a big deal out of it. So a lot of times, one of the first things you want to do is, I know this, and a lot of my clients get frustrated about this, but if you have anybody that has an addiction to something, first thing you want to do is remove temptation. So I would not have any food on the counter, because every time I jump up on the counter as a dog and I get a reward, then that motivates me to want to do it again. It was successful. So if you can, for maybe 2 months, keep all food off of the counters, every time I get up here, there's nothing there. That'll help them get out of that habit. But every time they get a piece of meat or cheese or whatever it is, that motivates them to want to do that again. Now, we really had to work on setting up a foundation here. We're coming up on, I think, 5 hours for this session. It's supposed to be 3 hours, which is fine. But the dogs really need to set up a good foundation, and there's a lot of other things we can work on. But I really want the guardians to focus on exercise, structure, and hopefully going to puppy classes will help with a lot of that stuff as well. But exercise and structure, I think, is going to be the name of the game here to really help these dogs kind of get in a good practice pattern of good behavior. All right, so the idea for the exercise is to come up with a routine or a regimen that is reasonable for the humans in the house to achieve. So maybe we get up in the morning, let them outside to do some business, and then we bring one dog inside and play fetch, and the other dog plays fetch. Or maybe instead of fetch, maybe we let them outside to do their business, we bring them back inside, and I guess I was right, you play fetch. Once they get done fetching, you guys go and shower, get your morning ritual on. When you get done with the shower, the dogs have had 10 minutes to recover. Then you can feed them on a snuffle mats. And after that, they're going to be pretty tired. They're going to need to take a nap. And so you've set them up for success. Then maybe about 2 or 3 hours later, maybe we do some scent games, or we play fetch again, or we go for a walk. And remember, on a walk, the more they sniff, the more energy they burn. They burn more energy by sniffing than from walking. So let them sniff as much as they can, or as much as they want, as long as it's safe to do so. I would probably walk them separately so you can really have a positive experience with each one of them and have a little bit more control. And remember, there's nothing wrong with exercising your dog before you take them for a walk. That will make your walks a lot more enjoyable. Now, if you want to teach them to walk with a loose leash, let us know. I'm happy to send Dominique, one of our trainers, out here. She's one who kind of focuses on that. She has a bunch of exercises that teaches the dog when I get to the end of the leash, come back to the human and get a reward. So instead of walking in a heel, which takes a lot of time and effort, it's not very much fun for the dog, we just teach the dog not to pull and lunge on the leash so you can actually enjoy your walk. Let me see. As they get old, when they get older, a little bit over a year, you can actually get them doggy backpacks. They look like harnesses, and they have pockets right here, like saddlebags for horses. You can put bottles of water or things in there. Now they're carrying something that makes the walk more efficient. Let me see. So exercise is going to be really important. It really needs to be happening every 2 to 4 hours throughout the day. So I want you to keep maybe a journal, write down a date at the top of the page, and have a column for each dog, and write down the time and how many quantities of repetition, the time and how many scent games, treats for scent games, the time and how many fetches or the walk or whatever it is. Also put down what time you feed them, anything notable that happens, and at the end of the day, decide. Okay, Duke, that was a C+ day. Dutch, that was A-. So Dutch, we're probably okay. Duke, that's the next day. Let's do a couple more repetition. Instead of doing fetch 3 times for 20 treats, maybe we do fetch 3 times for 25 treats, or maybe 4 times for 20 treats. And so the idea is to keep on playing around with those elements until eventually we come up with the right amount of exercise that satiates the dog's needs, that is reasonable for us to do with our regular work schedule. And then after a while, the dog will just continue doing, you kind of get in a habit of doing that, and then you're setting your dog up for success. But also remember, before you take your dog to the vet, before you get their nails trimmed, before you take them to puppy class, before you have visitors come over, whatever it is, you find out how much that exercise is that they need to succeed for that activity, and then you start setting them up for success. All right, let me see. What else do we go over? We also went over, well, the importance of rules. Right now, it's going to be hard for the guardians to enforce rules. So I would just go through maybe a couple pre-max. And maybe, like I said, I would practice eating in here. So I'd have one of the guardians come in and eat at your regular chair, the other one over here with dog kibble, and the other dog somewhere away with a bully stick or something. So every time the dog crosses the threshold onto the carpet in here, throw the treat behind him. Turns around, runs and gets it, wait for them, and as soon as they cross the threshold, throw another one. At first, you'll do it for about 10 to 25, 30 treats, and eventually they'll kind of start hanging out there. Then maybe every 10 seconds you throw a treat. Then eventually every 20 seconds you throw a treat. They're not, now at this point, they're not crossing the threshold. We're just feeding them and rewarding them for not coming inside. And we're gradually elongating that duration until like maybe it's a treat every 1 minute, every 2 minutes, and so on and so forth. And eventually it gets to the point where they just stay outside the room when we're eating. Then we get done, we call them in, and then we give them a little pet, and then we let them know that boundary time is over. So one of the rules I usually have is not being allowed around the humans when they're eating. The dogs should not be around each other when they're eating. I would normally feed them one at a time. I don't know if the guardians here are going to be able to achieve that because it helps them practice it. So right now, if the guardians want to feed them in separate rooms, that's fine. Just use those snuffle mats. That makes feeding 3 times a day like some exercise. We also talked about pre-max. Pre-max is a principle. It means that a less desirable behavior earns you a more desirable behavior. So I go to the door, I tell the dog to sit 1 time. If it sits within 2 seconds, I open the door. If it doesn't sit within 2 seconds, I sit down nearby, wait for 1 minute, then go back to the door and command it again. The more you say your command words, the less you mean it. Eventually your dog will stop listening for the word, or you will help your dog practice ignoring you. So say it once. If the dog doesn't do it that time, I might say it in a high-pitched voice. If it doesn't do that, then I would make a mental note. I got to teach the dog how to come or to sit or whatever it is, because I probably haven't done a great job of doing that. Most of my clients, when I ask the dog if the dog has a bad behavior, I ask the clients, have you taught the dog how it's supposed to behave? And people look at me like I'm crazy. So the way that I do that is I create the easiest version of that activity. So if we want to teach the dogs not to rush out the door, I would practice opening the door when nobody is outside and there's no stimulation outside. And the dogs have been exercised first, and I only do this 1 dog at a time. So, and I showed you a little bit about doing that. So I would tell the dog to go here, and reservations or whatever the word is, and then I moved my foot, and I'm going to do this with my feet. I took my foot here, and then I started leaning away, and the dog got up at that point. So I backed up, and I took a step back, then I came a step forward, and I gave the dog a treat because it stayed in a sit. I did that about 5 times. And after that, then I took a step back, and then I leaned, then I came back and gave the dog a treat. So this will be several steps before you can even just walk to where the door is. But what we're teaching the dog is when I go to the door, I want you to stay right here, 5 feet away from the door. And I'm going to practice and reward you for doing that, and just do step 1 over and over and over again until you're doing it. Only then you go I do it to step 2 and repeat that one over and over. And so you do all the individual steps. When you actually get to the door, just reach for the handle. Don't touch it. Just reach, put your arm back, go back and give the dog a treat. Then walk back again, reach, do that about 5 times. Then I might snap it a little bit so it makes a little bit of sound. That's a hard one. Dogs usually get up. So anytime the dog fails, then I would back up a previous step, practice where I was successful a couple more times, then try to do it again. And remember, exercising ahead of time is going to set them up for success. This is going to take some practice. Not a lot. You'd be surprised how quickly this happens. The problem is we try to do this when we have to take the dog outside to go potty or somebody's at the door. We've put an artificial time on it that has nothing to do with the learning. We will learn. Somebody wants you to do something, and then they say, okay, I need you to do this for the first time. You have 10 seconds. Well, automatically, I'm going to be stressed out about it. So take that time out of it. Help your dog practice behavior when it doesn't have to go to the bathroom. So when it's Duke that has to, so when we take Duke out to go potty, when we come back, that's when a good time to practice it. We know he's empty, so there's nothing, no rush to get to the door. And so eventually, I can't just drop something. So basically, eventually you'll be able to get to walk all the way to where the door is. You can reach for the handle, you jiggle it up and down, the dog stays seated, then you open it a crack. It's kind of a version of the video I did above on the delayed entry at the door. And eventually the dog will learn, my job is to sit right here the whole time, and eventually go over to open the door, open it all the way up, close it, walk back over and give the dog a treat. And again, there's nobody at the door. So after you get to the point where you go to the door, again, I would say the command word. So every time you come back, you might say place or spot or reservations, or you gotta come up with a funny word. Then eventually you go to the door, you say reservations, dog comes over here and sits down. Then you open the door, and then maybe now it's one of you. So we're doing this where the person's not knocking at the door, because that's going to create a lot of excitement. So you text each other, hey, I'm at home, I'm at the door, why don't you come and open up, let me in. So we have the dog, and we're setting up a situation to help the dog practice the scenario. Reservations, dog sits down there, you go over there, open the door, and then, hey, one of my guardians comes in. Now he's probably going to get excited and start walking towards you. So in that case, the guardian would step back outside the door. And then we say reservation, the guardian doesn't try to come back in until the dog is back in this place. Now, this is not going to stop your dog from barking when people are at the door when you're not there. This is just when you're answering the door, teaching the dog, when I answer the door, this is what I expect from you. And if you do what I want, I'll give you a reward. Eventually, you'll be able to get to the point where you come over, open the door, let your guest in. Guest comes in, you come over here, and you give the dog a treat. The dog has now practiced some self-restraint, self-control. Instead of spazzing out on them, they're sitting quietly, being passive. Yeah, I did the spazzing out demonstration on my own, thank you. And then eventually, the dog, you come over and give the dog the treat and the reward, and we're teaching the dog how to be calm. We taught them all the individual steps, and we're rewarding them when they do it the way we want. After a while, that just becomes normal behavior, and then once both dogs do it together, or separately, then I would bring them together, but again, I would practice it with nobody at the door. And then eventually do it with you guys at the door, and eventually have a guest or somebody come to the door. But the idea is, I'm watching you, he's going to counter surf again. But the idea is, again, to teach the dog how to do what we want and reward them for doing it. And then practice it a lot until it becomes a natural behavior. He's fine. He's on that side now. I don't know if he is over there or not. Counter surfing over there or not. Okay, let me see. That's the pre-mac principle is telling the dog to sit at the door. So I go to the door and I say sit one time. If it doesn't sit within 2 seconds, I'd walk away and sit down in the nearby area. Wait for 1 minute. After 1 minute, go back to the door and command him again to sit. If he doesn't sit this time within 2 seconds, I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time I walk away for 4 minutes, 8 minutes, and make sure you're sitting down each time you walk away. But as soon as that dog sits, fly that door open. After a while, the dog will sit to say, I'd like to go outside. Now, the guardian was asking how to teach, it'd be nice if the dogs would bark to let me know they have to potty. Well, we can teach them to ring a bell, sit, to do that. But right now, I would just teach them the command word to potty. So every time you go outside to potty, make sure you have one treat with you. Sneak it in your pocket quietly so he doesn't know that it's there. Walk outside, and don't tell him potty. Come up with your new word, business or whatever it is. And as soon as he crouches down, starts to pee, say business. When he gets done, pull out the treat. Make sure you wait for him to finish before you pull out the treat. And then hold it out and give it and say business, and then pop it in his mouth. If you do this enough, the dog's like, why would I waste this urine in the house? This stuff is valuable. If I put it outside, I get a reward for it. So look for opportunities to do pre-max. I do a pre-max, the dog has to sit before I even start the process of opening the container to put food in the bowl, or in this case, a snuffle mat. Or sit before I pick up the leash to attach it to you. All the times all the activities your dog behaves in where it doesn't behave the way you want, that's a wonderful celebrate right there. Sit. I just did one right here. The more you reward your dog for those things that you want, the more the dog will offer you those particular behaviors. That was great. Guardian did a great job there. All right, so let's. We also talked about petting with a purpose and passive training. Petting with a purpose is what it sounds like. It's petting your dog for a reason. So if the dog comes up and jumps up on me like the dog did before and I pet it, remember anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're specifically rewarding. You're training your dog to jump up, crash. So what I do instead is the dog jumps up on me or nudges me or paws me or whatever it is, I would just give it a counter or tell it to sit. If the dog sits, I pet it under its chin and pet it as much or as little as I want. If it doesn't sit within 2 seconds, I would lean back and disengage. Playing hard to get works great for dating. It works great for dog training too. Show the dog, I'm living my best life. I got 6 other things I could be doing. Petting you is number 1, but if you don't want to sit, it doesn't bother me. There's no amount of punishment that will ever work for dogs. All it will really do is make you feel bad about yourself and damage your relationship with your dog. It's not going to help them learn at all. I have some clients who are like, no, the dog came home and he was guilty because I come home, he cowers, and then I found that he shredded something. The shredding something is incidental. I have to tell that person, no, what happens is you've come home and been so angry to your dog that your dog expects you to come home and be angry and abusive. That's not a good combination. So if you feel any punishment's required, I would get a stick or a metal rod, something that would hurt really hard, and I would smack yourself because that means we probably didn't do a good job, but there's no punishment that'll help any dog learn anything. All right, so basically, what else do we talk about? So you can do pre-max for the leash and all the rest of those things. And again, make it the small activity. If the dog doesn't know how to behave, create an activity where you can help them practice the easiest version of it possible and set them up for success. Exercise them, make sure there's not a lot of stimulation and other things going on. We often put dogs in the hardest situation possible, wonder why they fail. Well, we don't do that for ourselves. Let's set our dogs up for success as well. All right, so petting with a purpose is if the dog nudges you or you want to pet the dog. If the dog nudges you, nothing happens. But if you, other than you give the dog a counter order. If the dog sits in that 2-second window, you pet on her chin, pet her as much or as little as you want. If it doesn't, you play hard to get. After a while, the dog will start sitting in front of you to prepay for the attention. When it does, you bet your butt you better pet him. Otherwise, you're going to go back to nudging you, jumping up, and whatnot. Use the watchword of paycheck. If you suspect someone's petting without a purpose, somebody says paycheck and I'm petting the dog, I stop petting, even if I did it right. Then I tell the dog to sit, and if it sits, then I pet it, and I would tell the guardian, hey, actually I asked the dog to sit, you missed it, but thanks for reminding me. So paycheck is really for the humans to help keep themselves on point. We also talked about passive training, which is a little bit of what I was doing earlier and what the guardian's doing over there by celebrating. So passive training is waiting for the dog to do the things that you want it to do without your command. So every time your dog's walking towards you, when it's 1 foot away, say the word come, if that's your command word, and then reach and pet it. Remember the command word, the precedent to the action, and then the reinforcement or the pet or the treat comes at the end. And I would try to avoid saying good boy. If you want to say anything, you say good, but I would really just have you just pet the dog and channel your energy in petting the dog. It's hard. You're going to be you're in a habit of saying good dog. Just try not to do that. There you go. So basically what we're doing is we're celebrating the things the dog does that we like. So if somebody says celebrate to me, I stop what I'm doing, I immediately start petting the dog. I remember I only have 2 seconds. Somebody watched it happen, that was second one, they just said celebrate number 2. I only have a fraction of a second to start petting the dog. But eventually what I want to do is I want to keep my eye on. I see that dog walking towards me, I say come right when they're 1 foot away. They're starting to go into a sit right before the butt hits the ground, I say sit, and I start petting them. They're about to lay down right before the chest hits the ground, I say crash or chill or whatever it is. If you want to give them a different command word to eat, maybe one of them is pork chop, one of them is meatball. So every time you say meatball, right before they take their first bite of food. Do that for about 3 months. You say meatball, and the dog will go over there and eat its food. Let me see. So celebrate is the watchword we use for this. So if I point at you, say celebrate, just stop what you're doing and start petting. I'm hoping, that's an interesting position. I'm hoping that we're going to get the dogs kind of like pretzel position. I'm hoping that we're going to get these puppies in our puppy class because I think it's really going to help. We'd like to get them in separate puppy classes. Now, if you want to teach them to go to a place, to not go to the door, the loose leash or whatever it is, let us know. We can set you up with a training session with Dominique or whatever it is. And if you're in puppy classes, because you already did this, we'll hook you up with a discount. Just make sure you let Addie know. Just say, hey, David said we get a bit of a discount. If people are doing the right thing, we want to hook them up. Now, if you're going to do a discount, if you're in puppy classes, you get a 25% discount. So I would order like 4 or 5 or 6 sessions or whatever it is, so you get that percentage discount for all of them. Now, if you have any questions on the stuff that we went over or anything else, I want you to text me. If I don't hear from you, I'm assuming that everything is going great. So text me. I don't care if it's 2 minutes after I leave the door or 2 years from now. Make sure you text me. If I don't hear from you, I assume that everything's going great. Now, a couple other housekeeping things. Good attention, bad attention, the same thing. Dogs probe to determine where boundaries and limits are, and our inconsistency is very confusing to them. So try to be very consistent. Don't reward the dogs by helping them break a rule, because the more that they do that, you're giving them a taste. They're just going to want to continue breaking that rule. So if you want to reward them, rub their belly, scratch them behind the ear, play fetch, do something like that. Don't invite them on the couch or whatever the case may be. These dogs, I would probably recommend not laying them on the furniture. The guardians have this chair and this chair right here for the dogs. I would put dog beds over here, and a giant one, so we can hopefully get them sleeping together, or put 2 next to each other and throw those treats on there. I've got a video that teaches dogs how to go to the dog bed on command, but now they're kind of farther away from the window, which will make them less barky at every sound at the window. And I know the guardians, I know you want to have them bark at certain things, but I think you're going to get to the point where they're going to be barking a lot of the wrong things, and then you're going to yell. Remember, good attention, bad attention is the same thing. So a lot of times we condition dogs to do a lot of nuisance barking, and they might do that when you're gone, trying to get you to come home. You get calls from the humane society and stuff like that you don't really want. If you want to go over that faux command, remind me, and I'm happy to go over that with you. You want to come up here? If I get a treat, will you come up for a treat? This is Dutch, right? Come here, Dutch. Come here, buddy. Well, this is Dutch. Yes. Come here, Duke. And this is the Duker. He doesn't want to come up. And this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.